We need you to adopt many kids in California. Keep them on task, Colonel.
I think I could do that.
Okay. Mr. Ting?
So just as a follow-up, just out of curiosity, so if a student takes 12 units each quarter, is it? Then wouldn't they graduate at least 5 years though?
That's correct, assuming they didn't come in with any prior units or any other. If they started just from scratch, if you do 12 units a semester, 24 a year, that gets you to 5 years to do that 120 units for a degree.
Great. So given that, what are creating the barriers to graduation? And then additionally, I want to understand, I see the goals of what you're trying to do to increase the graduation rates, but what actual programs are you funding? And then separate from that, if you only got the 119 million, where would you spend it of the 269? That's not clear here.
In addressing your first question, we share the same questions. It's very hard to determine what those barriers are. And one of the things we've recommended is part of the performance measures that the universities submit annually, that in areas where they're lacking in performance, they identify what the underlying causes are and identify strategies they're currently taking to address those issues. It can be difficult at times because the campuses take different strategies and have different practices in place. But that is a recommendation we've made going forward.
Thank you. And also, I see slide 9, so you don't have to answer the last question.
But maybe if I could jump into a complicated discussion, I may regret this in just a moment. But I think one of the points that were just made kind of are the thinking behind what we'll talk about later in the Innovation Awards. And I think a lot of what the administration has suggested is a problem are systemic or institutional policies, systems, practices that create cultures that don't necessarily lead to students graduating in 4 years. And so when you raise the point about, there's a part of this CSU's budget that suggests that you need money to improve graduation rates and improve student success, I think we question that assumption. And I think you'll see it, and we'll talk about it later, in some of the practices we've seen that were recognized in the Innovation Awards this year, is that there are certain policies and systems that campuses can change that can have a dramatic effect on the goals that are important to the state. So I'll leave that discussion for a later item.
If you wouldn't mind me jumping in, Chair, that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
I want to answer Assemblymember Ting's question. We've got a lot of system-wide initiatives that we put down there. And one of them, right off the top, that is really showing a lot of success is that associate degree for transfer. That's where you do a lot of your undergraduate work at the community colleges. You know what those courses are, and you can seamlessly come in, and that program is ramping up. So that's obviously one of those ways. The other way is we have the early assessment and early start programs. Early assessment is when you're in 11th grade. You take you're taking your regular tests, and you're finding that you're deficient in math or science. We actually require our students to attend an early start program in advance, and that way they're hitting the ground running and ready to do college level work. Usually that's only a one level down in terms of remediation work. We've also done, from a system-wide perspective, a very huge lift in reducing the number of units it takes in order to get a degree. That's not saying that we're compromising the quality of the degree. We're saying that it's basically if a degree had kind of grown to a level of needing 133 units to graduate, one of the questions was, well, why does that require? Why can't it be narrowed to 120? We have dropped that down to 95% of all of our degrees are within that 120 unit. And the list can go on and on. There's also those high-impact practices. There's a lot of data and information out there that basically says, and this is just an easy one to understand, if you are engaged in some aspect on your campus, it could be a whole host of things, then you're likely to persist. It's as simple as that. If you feel that you're part of the community and that you are academically at a point where you have academic rigor, then there is a chance that you're going to persist better by being involved in those sorts of things. That's being involved in lab work, that's being involved in clubs, that sort of thing. So there's a whole host of things that we are proposing in our budget request and that we've already done on our own.
Thank you for the clarification. But just to go back to Mr. Osmena's point, which is that I also am skeptical that it absolutely has to require funding to achieve the superior results. I'm trying to understand what can be done to greater incentivize student participation to get through in 4 years or 5 years. Some of the things you mentioned in terms of culture I know are very challenging because a lot of the students are commuter students. A lot of the students work full-time outside of going to school. So what incentives are you creating? I think the starting early is a great idea. I think anybody who, if you can, it's possible to create admissions and make them contingent upon starting early if they really need it, so they don't waste a year in not being able to do math or certain kinds of courses because they're behind. But I want to get a better understanding of sort of what else is occurring, because I think it's not simply spending more money to fund new programs.
And I think it goes back to that earlier comment that it is a complicated discussion. I mean, it really is. It takes money to offer courses, right? You need to hire faculty to do it. That's clear as day, right? If a course isn't being offered, it has to be offered. On the other hand, there are those things that are really not costly, like reducing the units to degree. That's a kind of a policy administrative thing that you can do that can move the needle on things. And then we'll talk about it a little bit later, but but the idea that we have to expand our investment authority. So that we can actually be creative on the revenue side of things, so that we can really tackle some of our facility needs. One of those things that you've probably all heard from your district or your colleagues' district is how the science buildings in your districts are challenged, or that there's a need for better and more sophisticated equipment. That's one way that we could possibly reinvest without a dime coming from you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We're now going to proceed with public comment on this item. Yeah, he's got until 5:30.
Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. We're obviously very concerned that over 30,000 students who were qualified were denied a spot. We're very worried about what this means for low-income first-generation students. We as a state told these students that they needed to take A through G. An increasing percentage of underrepresented students are, and now we're denying them a spot in a four-year university. So I was very encouraged to hear the question, what happens if we give you more than 97 million more? We'd obviously love to see a spot for every single one of these students, but also because they're first-generation low-income, to make sure they have the support services they need, whether it's a counselor or additional information about financial aid, because a lot of these students don't have the information they need and are working more hours than they should. And so we encourage the legislature to look at the funding. I do know sometimes we ask the question, can we be more innovative? We absolutely can, but we have to remember that we have been funding these students at less, and sometimes less is just less. Thank you.
Nora Lynn, on behalf of the California Faculty Association. We support a robust augmentation for the CSU, and we want to thank the chairman and the speaker both for their support of an augmentation that goes above and beyond the governor's recommendation. We understand that the staff recommendation is to hold this item open, and we look forward to working with the CSU and the subcommittee as we approach the May revise.
Good afternoon, Meredith Turner with the Cal State Student Association, representing 460,000 students of the CSU. Appreciate your continued conversation regarding the needs of the CSU and our students, and look forward to your continued support for the additional resources that our students need to succeed. Thank you.
Chair McCarty, members, David Bala Hawkins with the CSU Employees Union. We've had a record number of applicants fall of 2015. 790,000 applicants. And if you look at the denied access, in addition to the 30,000 last year, since the recession, we've turned away 140,000 students. So we need funding for enrollment. We need access for K through 12 graduates. We also need to improve community college transfers. Secondly, it's just simply put, we need more classes and we need more student services. One of the reasons why there's been such a delay in graduation rates is students simply cannot get class sections where they have inadequate support from counseling and other student services. So it's obvious, and I think it's obvious to everyone in this room, that the CSU needs more funding, and we hope that this committee will work with the governor's office to help provide that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No more comments on this item. We're going to hold this item open till the May revision, but the bottom line is, you heard it. This subcommittee is a big supporter of the CSU system and would like to focus on what's in the governor's budget, plus go at least $97 million to focusing on fulfilling the master plan and serve anybody who can benefit from the CSU system. So we're going to hold this issue open. Before we proceed with the other CSU items, I know some committee members have to leave. So we're going to briefly go to the California State Library, issue number 5, and just to issue number 5, then we'll go back to the other library issues. But this is the only one we have a vote on today. So if we can have the Department of Finance do a brief overview of this item. Very brief.
Matthew Seha, Department of Finance. So as the agenda states, the governor's budget includes a proposal to establish 2.5 positions for an accounting unit within the California State Library. And currently, the State Library contracts with Department of General Services Fiscal Services Unit, which is responsible for the State Library's accounting tasks. The State Library estimated the work being done by Fiscal Services was the equivalent of 2.5 positions, and the governor's budget proposes to provide authority for these positions, and the State Library may redirect its funding towards supporting the item. This change would create workload efficiencies as the State Library begins utilizing the fiscal system in the 2015-16 year. Additionally, the administration has proposed to increase funding to the State Library through the April Finance Letter, which provides $278,000 to fund increased debt service and rent costs at the Library and Courts building and the Library Annex. Also, it's requested $43,000 to fund increased technology service charges from the California Department of Technology, and the total April letter finance request is for $321,000. Thank you.
Thank you. And the LAO is in accord with this item?
LAO takes no issue with the item.
Okay. Mr. Librarian? All good. Okay.
Second.
Okay. A motion is second on issue number 5. Let's call the roll.
Mr. McCarty?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez? Aye. Ms. Kim? Aye. Mr. Ting?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, and we'll hold the roll open for this item. And with that, we'll just finish that. Yeah, you're here anyway. Might as well just roll it forward. So, issue number 6, high-speed internet update.
Do you want me to start, or do you want me to?
Yeah, Department of Finance. Excuse me. Sorry. Oh, excuse me. State Librarian's going to start.
Well, in the interest of the subcommittee's time, the summary that you guys have put together pretty much is succinct and right on point about where we are. I can tell you what the most impressive thing to me has been over the last 9 months, which is how significant change the bandwidth can be and at what a reduced cost. I mean, for example, in Assemblywoman Kim's district, the Buena Park Library is one of the libraries participating in this, and right now they've got a 50 meg speed, which is slow for a household, right? Let alone for some place with a bank of 20 computer terminals, say. And so they're paying $1,250 a month for 50 megs. They're going to 1 gig for $145 a month under this program. So that, I mean, I see the advantages that are brought to libraries, but I've been struck by just how much some jurisdictions are saving and how much that's going to... We said in a previous report that it was a game changer, and I think some of the speeds that libraries are at right now, you're not even in the game in the 21st century. So I mean, it's more, now that I look at it over the past 9 months, it seems transformational in many respects, or in many jurisdictions anyway.
Okay. With that, just to interrupt real quick, the math just jumps out and speaks for itself, but the question I always ask is why were they paying $1,200 a month for such limited internet connection? It doesn't make any sense. I'm not sure.
I don't know. Sitting with me is Susan Hildreth, who's the former state librarian, the former head of the Federal Institute of Museums and Library Services, and like pretty much a rock star in the library world. Do you have the answer to that?
Well, I have the
said
answer to
punting.
that.
Yeah,
Susan
yeah, right.
Hildreth,
Yeah.
representing Khalifa today, and I think when you look at the savings that we're achieving, it's magnificent. Yet I have to also say that the provision of public access computers by public libraries over the last 15 years has been a critical role. So even though we had poor connectivity, it was absolutely critical in terms of meeting community needs to provide that public access to computers. But now, with the work, with this project that you have supported, we're working with Scenic on in the state library. We're just going to have super access and be able to provide a lot more robust bandwidth for homework and all kinds of content access. It really is a new age for us.
Sure. I guess the question I was asking is, sometimes you hear about the government rate being cheaper, but it sounds like the government rate here for libraries was way more expensive. I don't know who would pay that much,
No.
whether it's a private business or homeowners.
No, I think what you're seeing is, all the libraries were receiving their connectivity through their local telco providers, and it was at a variety of rates. And by amassing the libraries together, we're able to get advantage through working with Scenic's program, and also we're able to have more libraries take advantage of the federal subsidy for libraries, the education rate, as well as the California Teleconnect Fund. So those things are rather complicated to apply for, so I think that by aggregating our need, more libraries are going to be able to take advantage of that. And really, libraries were, at the, I don't want to say at the mercy, but they had to pay what their local connectivity was. And in some cases, many cases, it was pretty high.
Yeah, less well-served areas of the state where there's less competition, you can charge a higher amount because you're the only game in town.
Whatever you want.
And I can find out more and give you a better answer. But part of it, too, is that, like Susan was alluding to, the libraries often would get their connectivity through their city or county. Mm-hmm. So it may be kind of the global deal for the county is more expensive.
Gotcha. Okay, proceed now with the Department of Finance.
Sure. No, as noted in your agenda, the governor's budget provides $2.25 million general fund to allow for the California's public library branches to access that statewide high-speed network, and this is just a continuation of the funding that was appropriated in the 14-15 Budget Act.
LAO?
There aren't any new proposals in terms of budget proposals this fiscal year, so we don't have any comments on any particular budget proposals. We would note that, based on the report that we received from the State Library, only a portion of the state's library jurisdictions are currently have expressed an interest in connecting to the backbone, and only a portion of those libraries have connected as part of Phase 1. We would just recommend that the legislature continue to monitor this program and reassess it in a couple of years to ensure that it feels satisfied with the number of libraries participating in the program.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Any questions or comments from committee members? Hearing none, this issue will be held open until the May revision. Next, we're going to go to issue number 7, local library investments. Mr. Lucas, want to begin?
Again, the subcommittee summary pretty much hits the issues, as I would expect it to from a former colleague at the Chronicle.
Okay, that was a softball right there.
Well, go ahead, Matt. I mean, it's largely unchanged from last year, except the one-time money isn't present this year.
Okay. Department of Finance?
Right, yeah, I mean, as Greg, I guess, pointed out, great layout in the agenda. So the governor's budget really maintains the funding levels of the programs at approximately $2.8 million for the Library Literacy and English Acquisition Services, and then $1.5 million for the Library Services Act, and minus the one-time funding reductions.
LAO?
We would just note a couple of things, recognizing that there also aren't any specific budget proposals this year for these local programs. Firstly, the last year's budget allocated some one-time funding for these programs. We would just note that these programs are typically ongoing, and the legislature might want to consider the effectiveness of providing one-time funding in the future. Secondly, we would note, based on what the State Library has reported to us, a significant portion of one of the local programs was actually allocated and used towards implementing the scenic item that you just heard in the previous item. We think that the legislature in the future may want to add some more specificity to how it would like the State Library to spend these funds in the future.
Thank you. Public comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Mike Dillon, representing the California Library Association. I'd like to thank the committee and for giving, and particularly your consultant, for giving us the opportunity to speak today on these items. The analysis does a great job in noting the cuts to the literacy program and the loaning and lending program under the California Library Services Act over the years. Last year, Mr. Ting and Mr. Chavez are gone, but they would recall that this committee put in $10 million for these two programs, and ultimately it was reduced to $3 million. So this year, we're back on bended knee to see if we can get some additional money. Mr. Gatto is making another effort, as he did last year, and we'll be submitting a letter with some signatures asking for some additional funding. So in addition to any extra funding you might do for the broadband, the other great need is adult literacy and the loaning and lending program. Over the years, I've emphasized to this committee that the state gets a huge bang for the buck for these two programs. The literacy program uses volunteer tutors, but some funding is needed for materials and coordination. There are 4,000 people on a wait list. The lending and loaning program is also a huge benefit for the state. And lastly, we recognize that funding is tough this year, but we would emphasize that libraries since 2000 have been cut by 92%. These two programs, as well as another program of general funding that we used to get, it amounted to about $56 million. So 92% cut over the years, and we don't know of many other programs that have suffered that type of a cut. So thank you for any help you might be able to give us this year.
Thank you. Any more public comments on this issue?
Well, I would be remiss in not, on behalf of the state's 1,100 and some public libraries, not associating ourselves with the remarks from CSU that we're hopeful that the legislature provides us at least $97 million in the upcoming budget.
Yeah, okay, noted. Well, no other committee members here to opine, but I'd just like to say, as a former public library authority member for the Sacramento jurisdiction here, understand firsthand the importance of our public libraries, and know that the state used to have a much more significant role in helping with the operation and enhancements of our public libraries across California. So that it's well noted. We have a list as far as things we're taking a look at as we get close to the May revision, and this is certainly something that's on the list for consideration. So,
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So with that, we will go back to the section for CSU. Okay. Do you want to take a break? No, they're not. It's just a call. I'll text when call is lifted. So maybe we get finished in time. Okay.
So this is going to be Steve Boylard, who's the director.
Yeah, issue number 3. And if we could somehow expedite these a little bit.
Sure.
So I'm the only one here. I have to go vote in a second. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The governor's budget increases funding for the Center for California Studies by $20,000 in 15-16 to support increased costs for employee compensation. Your agenda notes that the budget also changes how funds for the center are displayed within CSU's budget. In previous years, the budget appropriated funds for the center in one item with statutory direction that those funds are to augment and then be transferred to the main appropriation for CSU operations. The governor's budget instead proposes to simply display the appropriation for the center within the main appropriation for CSU's operations in the Budget Act itself. And provisions within that main item would explicitly identify the amount and purpose of those funds. This change is intended to better convey the state's intent that the CSU makes decisions related to the center in an equitable way, including by providing salary increases to center employees consistent with the increases provided to other CSU employees. As your agenda also notes, the proposed Budget Act does not include some detail about funding for specific programs that had been included in previous Budget Acts. The information that had been included in the previous budgets was, in our conversations with the center's director, not accurate, and so Finance is happy to work with the committee to determine a way to provide accurate information.
Thank you. LAO?
We would recommend that the legislature reject this proposal for two reasons. One, the Center for California Studies is kind of a unique operation within CSU. It's not necessarily directly connected to the traditional instructional services CSU provides, and it actually provides very specific services to the legislature. So it's sensible that the Center for California Studies is budgeted separately from the rest of CSU. And secondly, by eliminating that schedule, we're concerned that the legislature loses not only some transparency as to how those funds are spent, but also loses some of that control over how the Center for California Studies uses that funding. Now, as Mr. Osmeña pointed out, CSU has reported that it hasn't been following the schedule, that there's a difference in what is displayed in the schedule and what CSU reports is actually spending its funds. We would recommend that the legislature look into this, get more information as to why these are different. If it finds that it likes the way that the Center for California Studies is allocating its funds, it could adjust the schedule accordingly. If, on the other hand, it finds that that's not the case, it might want to hold the Center for California Studies more to that schedule. We view the schedule as something that's supposed to be controlling in the budget.
Okay. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Steve Boylard, Executive Director at the Center for California Studies. Just a couple of quick points. One is that we appreciate where Department of Finance is trying to come from on this, that it's true that our schedule has been, I've been there for 3 years, and I can't really crosswalk how that had been developed in the past. So I do think that the schedule is not that helpful the way it's set up. Finance has just taken it out. I think I'd certainly be able to work with your staff to develop a different way to schedule the information. So right now there's about 6 or 7 different elements, and the amount of money in each of those elements just really isn't tracking with what we actually spend. So again, I'm happy to work with your staff to fix that part. I'd also just acknowledge that the vast majority of our money that we receive in this budget is really a pass-through that goes on to the fellows. We have 64 fellows in all 4 of our fellowship programs. And most of the money is for their stipends, their fees, their benefits. So it's really mainly a pass-through. We're happy to display that, but just so you know, that's where most of the money is going. And I also just want to express my appreciation. Last year, this committee provided a significant increase in those stipends for the fellows. It was the first increase they received in 10 years. Mm-hmm. I think we essentially did 10 years worth of COLAs last year. I really appreciate your kind of causing a catch-up. And what I would ask that you consider is maybe on an annual basis doing a modest annual COLA for the fellows. There is a COLA in the budget for my staff. That's $20,000. You might want to extend that as well to the fellows, which would be another $60,000 or so. Okay.
Can you put that to? Can you make sure you submit that in writing to the?
Yes, I'll share it with your staff and with Finance and LAO.
Any public comment on this item? Just as far as the center, I think most of us are very familiar with the center. I am, and we like the center, and also we like it where it's at. I think it makes sense in the set aside in the budget, and I think it would somewhat get lost, and it has a separate role, and I think that has the appropriate location. And just want to note that the one issue is, as far as the center, is the Sacramento semester program as well, and appreciate that you had the increase for the fellows, but just wondered if that had been increased the stipend at all for the SAC semester students, and if it had not, if maybe you could take a look at that and present to us. It's a very, very small number.
Yes, the SAC semester program, I think we have about $56,000 we spend on that right now. There is no stipend that goes specifically to the SAC semester students.
Yeah.
Again, these are students who spend a semester working as interns in the Capitol. The money we have is for financial aid for those students.
Well, it's a financial aid stipend to students,
yes.
needy students. And the question is, have we ever increased
It was
that?
increased last year as part of when you did the increase. Most of the money went to a fellows stipend increase, a little bit went to a new fellows relocation grant, and we also had a little bit more money that went into the financial aid for SAC semester.
Okay,
but
good.
you might want to consider doing like a 3% increase on that as well, just to keep up with inflation.
Thank you. Okay, this issue we will as well hold open until the mayor revise. Next issue, number 4, CSU investment policies. Yeah, set the stage here. This is an issue that that came to the attention of the Budget Committee in large part because one of the trustees, the Speaker of the Assembly, Tony Atkins, spoke about this issue at a trustees meeting and wanted to bring it back for consideration during the budget process.